Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production Grid YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. And today I am here to review The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, the 16th studio album from the thrash metal giants themselves, Megadeth. So, this of course what was released on September 2nd, which was just this past Friday, last week of Friday. Through at least Universal Music or UME, Tradecraft, which is Dave Mustaine's label, and T-Boy Records. I don't know where the hell that label has been. Anyways, again, it's been released and since past Friday, and this, of course, is the follow-up to 2016's Dystopia. So, without further ado, let me get into my overall thoughts on The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. Let's get into it. So, before I really get into my overall thoughts on The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, you know what I have to do. I have to do a track listing rundown so I can tell you folks what the songs were on this album, how many songs were on this album, and what's the time length for this album. And since I'm not going to be reviewing like all the exclusive versions of this album, basically. I'm not going to be reviewing like the Target exclusive or like the Japanese exclusive or whatever, or the European or the iTunes digital version of the album. No, I'm just going to be reviewing just the 12-track version of the album, which is the only original version of this album, and that's what I'm going to be reviewing. So just the 12 tracks. So, since we have at least 12 tracks on this album, it all clocks in at the length of 55 minutes and 6 seconds. So these 12 tracks, at least this album, kicks off with the title track, Life in Hell, Night Stalkers, Dogs of Chernobyl, Sacrifice, Junkie, Psychopathy, which is a 1 minute and 20-second little interlude that goes into Killing Time, which is not a cover of the Sweet Savage track. That probably would have been seen as plagiarism with Metallica. I have to throw that in there. Then, of course, into Soldier On, Slebutant, Mission to Mars, and then finally ending with We'll Be Back. So there you go. There's your 12 tracks on this release. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff that happened, prior, or at least during the overall recording of The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. So I'm not going to go into a lot of it. All you need to know that this was being recorded from May 2019 to, of course, this year. And obviously David Ellefson ended up jerking himself out of position. And then, of course, pretty much his bass parts being re-recorded by Testaments and Sadus, actually. Sadus, the band, who was once the bass player for that band, Steve DiGiorgio, who also was in, like, Death and so on. So that's what ended up being, and that's all you probably need to know. So what are my thoughts, though? What are my thoughts on The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, since I think this should be the focal point anyways of this review, is my thoughts on the album. Since I don't want to be too long with this review, since I'm pretty long when it comes to a lot of the more bigger acts, when they release at least a newer release from like Accept, The Saxon, at times maybe Satan, Scorpions, Judas Priest, AC/DC, and yada 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 yada. I'm usually a lot more longer, but this one I'm going to be at least a bit more to the point, since I don't know if there's really much else I can really say about this release. So now I have reviewed Dystopia on this channel. I reviewed Dystopia when it was a brand new release back in 2016, and that was a good release, though at the time I was a little bit lukewarm towards it, but these days I feel it definitely was a great album. It's definitely one of those that really grew on me. Now, of course, you probably don't need to know a lot of my thoughts about, let's say, the stuff that was, in between, like, Endgame and Dystopia, like 13 and Super Collider and all that stuff. Again, rocky history. And so when it comes to any sort of brand new release, or especially when Megadeth or Dave Mustaine decide, after releasing such a very heavy record that was Dystopia, usually there's a pattern. And in a way, I guess you can say that The Sick, the dying and the dead, in a way, is kind of, it not so much kind of fits that sort of pattern, but it almost kind of pushes towards that pattern where it's like, after releasing such a heavy record, he comes back with an album that's not quite as heavy and not quite as great as, well, the previous release. And that's usually is. And he might go into a bit of a slight consistency where the next release ends up continuing this almost kind of weird kind of pattern in a way. And that's kind of a similar what you have with, let's say, like a band like Nazareth, who were known for that. They'll release a heavy record, or they might release a slew of heavy records, and then they'll kind of go into a bit of pattern afterwards where the releases aren't nearly as great or near as heavy as the other, and they might come back with one or two more heavier records. That's kind of what ends up being the case with Megadeth. So in a way, Megadeth are like the thrash metal version of Nazareth to this extent. And I don't think that that's really a bad example, or a bad, comparison. So that's kind of the way I tend to see this record. It's kind of a middle ground. There are definitely some great parts on this record, but there's definitely a lot of parts that ends up kind of feeding these merits in a way where they tend to see these patterns. And I'm just gonna go off the bat here. It opens up with the title track, and I don't know where the audio track is taken. I recall hearing this little intro clip before from somewhere. I'm wondering if it's taken from like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's been that long since I've even seen that movie, but I swear it has to be from one of those. Something it's so familiar. Finally, we do get into the track, and at first, I was like, okay, this isn't too bad, but it seems like I felt this before. It feels like deja vu again. It's like it feels so deja vu, because it's just Dave Mustaine trying to recreate something that's very similar to like Hangar 18 and the overall sound. He did that with 13. This is where I almost feel like there's parts of the sound where I'm like getting at times 13 vibes. Now, it's not nearly as bad as say like 13, especially with the fact that at least these songs are more original and not like rehashed re-recordings that just seem like it was just filler to fill out at least 13 tracks because of I have to have an album, it's titled 13 and I need 13 tracks. And there's at least not a whole lot of that. At least that's is a good start in a way. That's at least some positive. But at the same time, there's just a bit of 13 vibes. Because again, he did that with was a Public Enemy #1 or something off of 13. Sounds so much similar. The riff and everything to this sounds so much similar. And I'm just like, okay. However, this is where we really get, where I feel the album starts to really pick up, and whereas I get the better feel of what this album is trying to, at least it was trying to accomplish. And that's with Life in Hell, Night Stalkers, and Dogs of Chernobyl. These three songs is where it's like, alright, this is where I think the album is trying to make its point. This is where I really feel like this is, again, I got a little bit of an odd start with the title track. And usually the title track is usually one of the best tracks, and at least when it comes to these Megadeth records, except for Super Collider. However, some reason this is one where it's like kind of, it's a little meh for me. It kind of, to me, it just kind of not really as great. It kind of wants to go there, but it's just one of those where it's like, I've heard it before, I don't know if I want to hear it again. So that's where I'm at. It's just that the album really picks up with these three songs. With the song Night Stalkers, this is really one of my favorite songs on the album. Hell, the Ice-T part doesn't even bother me, which is like one in the middle of the song here. And prior to this, I didn't even hear this track when it got dropped as a single, and the people that I'm friends with online were like, oh my, this song was really great until Ice-T came in and started rapping. And I was like, oh, it bit turned me. And I have no problem with Ice-T's metal stuff like body count. I have no problem with that. So I just was like thinking, how is this going to be? So finally, when I heard it as part of on the album here for the first time, it didn't bother me at all. And I think, if anything, it doesn't even, it's not that distracting at all. I think there's a lot of overreacting, I feel, in there. But again, that's just personally me. I think it's definitely one of the best songs off the album. And of course, then we get into Dogs of Chernobyl. Really great track. So it's like we get from kind of a slight bland start for the album. We're then at least treated to 3 really fucking great songs. Then, of course, afterwards, we get Sacrifice, which is more of a kind of a galloping kind of thrasher. Not too bad, in a way. And I do say, because it's definitely kind of borders on that. I've seen some people that I know find that this is kind of the beginning of where things start to kind of get a little bit herky-jerky in a way, and kind of, I guess you can say, kind of just jerks the train right off the track for a little bit. And I don't quite see it. At first, I kind of was on first listen with this track. But on the second listen, it's like it began to really grow on me. So I think Sacrifice is not really that bad of a track to begin with. Yes, it's a little bit kind of mundane to an extent after like Life in Hell, Night Stalkers, and Dogs of Chernobyl. But I think it's a fine song, and I think it's, in a way, kind of keeps it. Where I feel where we really kind of get the train that's, to be jerked off the track here is with Junkie. I don't like that intro. It's so hokey to an extent. I think is so a little bit on the annoying side. And it just makes the song completely worthless to me. And it's probably the one song I just least care for. And I just end up skipping it. It's not a really good track in my opinion. And it's probably one of the worst aspects for me with this album. Then, of course, we get into Psychopathy, which I don't need to really comment on. It's just kind of a filler interlude track that could have just been a part of Killing Time. Dave Mustaine could have just put apart it. I don't know why he did it. It's just, I guess, because it's so epic, whatever. I don't fucking care. It should have just been a part of this one song. And even at that, it's not a great track, but it's at least a bit better than Junkie, but it's still nothing to really write home about. And of course, we get into Soldier On. Now, this is kind of where where the train begins to slowly get back on the track. Still not a particularly amazing track, but I think it's still a pretty fun track, and I think it's definitely 10 times better than the previous 2. But it's nowhere near as close to being as great as what we were kind of gifted with, like Life in Hell, Night Stalkers, and Dogs of Chernobyl. So it's still fine. Then, of course, let's definitely get into Celebutante. This one's kind of weird for me. This track now, you've heard this kind of riff before anyways. It definitely has a bit of a new wave or British heavy metal kind of quality to the track. And the reason I say that, if it wasn't for a guy like Metal Theologian who kind of pointed it out when he was talking about the band Metal Mirror, and was it the first song on side A of one of their 7 inches? If he didn't point this one out, I probably wouldn't have really, kind of call this out for being kind of a new wave or British heavy metal style riffing. And just the trait for this is that it's just the way this riff is played, where it almost sounds like it's kind of, in a way, kind of skipping to an extent. Which is, you kind of heard a little bit from those bands, in a way, where the riff is so kind of odd, like it's almost kind of skipping, but that's kind of what the charm is for there. I kind of get that with this one. That's what Dave Mustaine, I think, pretty much honed in. He really kind of mastered the excellence of what a new wave of British heavy metal riffing kind of is, and he kind of mastered that down, and he kind of uses it to an extent or to its full extent actually on this track. And there's some really great riffs. Hell, he pretty much reuses what the riff from looking down upon the cross off of the very first record, Killing Is My Business, and Business Is Good. He pretty much reused that riff, I think, from Looking Down Upon the Cross. And it's so fucking badass that he ended up doing that. So there's some really great riffs in this song. The thing that's weird for me is the lyrics. And especially since it's the one that really ties into the title of the song here. and it's just your kind of typical. It's a very, very similar to the Overnight Sensation song off of Accept's Too Mean to Die from last year. It's very similar. Great riffing, but the lyrics was just at the time kind of hokey, and there are probably a lot of people there just shouting "Boomer" at Dave Mustaine, and that's just one that ends up coming across. There's another track that's about, the Kardashians. They're all there to look pretty and everything. Listen, I get it. I'm not a big fan of the Kardashians myself, but I don't need to also hear at this point now every band that I like to complain about the Kardashians. At this point, it's turning into a rotting corpse that just seems to get beaten to death to, and it's already been. It's a dead horse that's becoming a corpse. At this point, I hope there's someone that just burns the corpse and just, that's it. We're done with it. So, that's my only really big nitpicking. It's just so stupid. So, it's a fun track in its own right, but those lyrics are just fucking stupid to me. Especially for such cool riffs in this song. I didn't really need these kind of lyrics. So we move on. We get into Mission to Mars, which at first I didn't really care for on first listen, but it's alright. Again, especially when on second listen, I started to really kind of appreciate this song, but especially towards the end, it really gets great. So it's like we're kind of getting back onto the train track. Finally, we'll be back, and that's when the train is finally back on track for me. It's like it ends off with one awesome fucking track again. To me, We'll Be Back, on with Life in Hell, Night Stalkers, and Dr. Chernobyl are probably the 4 of the really good fucking tracks off this one. Whereas we get at least 2 or 3 pretty good tracks, that being Sacrifice, Soldier On, and Mission to Mars, and then some that just come across as either being filler. That being like Junkie, Killing Time, and Celebutante. To me, just come across as just filler tracks to an extent. And I hate that they have to throw Celebutante in there because of all the cool riffs I said it has. But it's those lyrics and everything, and the title just is like, I think it just got wasted. Just the riffs everything got wasted for a stupid lyrics and everything. So there we go. Alright. And of course, I probably could comment on the bonus tracks. I should say, Target exclusive, I think, made a big mistake by including a live track instead of the song Police Truck, which is the cover, the Dead Kennedys cover. I would have been fine if it just been at least a Sammy Hagar cover, which is This Planet's on Fire, Burn in Hell. Great track though, really good song. Definitely, I do still prefer the original one that Sammy Hagar recorded. However, if you want to hear a really good version of the Sammy Hagar original, go find the Live 1980 record. That was the first version I ever heard, and that's probably my favorite version of the song. This Planet's on Fire, parentheses, Burn in Hell, is on the Live 1980 album. Find that one. I know there's been a Japanese reissue of it. Was it from this year? Go find it. Great. And it shouldn't be that difficult to find on record. Great track, though. But their cover of Police Truck is fucking great, actually. I would prefer that over just another live version of The Conjuring. It just feels like a wasted bonus track just for like, oh, hey, Target, you're pretty much promoting one of the more satanic songs from Megadeth, which at times is kind of pretty fucking hilarious, but So there we go. I guess I did go long with this review, no matter what I did. But I pretty much am done. I don't need to say too much other than, besides maybe 4 really good songs with at least 2 or 3, decent, pretty good tracks anyways, well, it's just a couple of filler songs. I think overall it's not too bad of an album. Not too shabby. So there you go, folks. There's my overall thoughts on The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead, and my overall rating for it is a 9.04. I almost was going to give it a 5, but after obviously going through my thoughts on this, I pretty much decided to kind of I guess in a way backtrack a little bit on there, and I took off a little. I just took off a number. So it's definitely a fun record, but this is far from the best thing I think Megadeth has released. I mean, this is not going to replace any of the classic albums, but I don't think it really needs to. But I mean, if you get done listening to your absolute favorites, and especially the classics, this might be one of the last ones, especially if you get into like United Abominations, Endgame, and Dystopia. this is one you probably can end up playing maybe afterwards. Maybe even after, I don't know, the world, actually, probably, you know what, I'll play this before the world needs a hero and Super Collider. So there we go. Again, it's out, this album has been out since September 2nd. So if you have any thoughts on this one, whether it be positive or negative, you leave them in the comment section below. But until then, this is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.